Well, welcome back to the Heath and Heather show. This may be more of the Heather and Heath show. And what you guys don't get to see off camera is some of the banter and us bumping heads on what we're going to do. And this is going to be a little bit one of those episodes. Maybe we'll do a bloopers sometime, but it would be fun. So Heather was telling me, Heather, tell me about being a nerd and making A's in high school.
Well, first off, it probably surprises none of you at this point, right? But when I got to thinking about our next topic, which is measurement, that I love, and Heath is like, great, we're gonna talk about that. We circled around to the fact that I did make straight A's in high school, and I actually think that's a really good way to explain how measurements in an organization should work too. So in our little scenario here, Heath, my parents are gonna be the senior leaders, and I, as the student, am gonna be the worker. So I had an ultimate goal of making straight A's, right? Now let me ask you, how often do you get a report card in high school?
I guess every quarter.
Sure, every quarter, so every 90-ish days, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna find out how you're doing. Is there any way to ensure you're gonna make an A if your plan is to sit and wait for the report card to come out and wait for that A to happen?
Oh no, that is a lag measure.
That is a lag measure. So I, as the very excited student who wanted to be valedictorian, nerd, took it upon myself to make a spreadsheet, because yes, we did have Excel back then as well. I knew going into every class what the homework was worth, what the quiz was worth, what the curve was going to be, all the way to the point that when I got to the final, I knew I needed to make 86% in order to keep my A, right? So I had a whole data set I was looking at, I had inputs I was measuring, all the way to the end, so that I could present that perfect report card to my parents and say, look, I made straight A's. In some ways, that's how senior leaders in the workforce think about their measures, right? Typically, your executives are going to be more concerned with those outcomes, the things that go in the annual report, the things that tend to lag at the end of the year. But it's the job of the people in the organization to find out what the quizzes are worth and how they're doing every day to ultimately get the A. So I wanted to ask you in return, how do organizations do this well when I'm probably the only one who actually likes to look at the numbers?
So Heather, I think that's a really good question. And this is a question for me to be authentic. I probably need to answer it more from my failures than my successes. So early on, I came in with a lot of numbers thinking a team would want to move, especially when I moved from an organization that really understood that numbers were the stories of the people within the organization. And I attribute to this, it's like bringing a baseball bat. If I come up with a baseball bat, if I'm used to playing baseball with it, I might see it as a really positive tool and enjoy it because it's part of the game. However, if I've been beaten with a bat, I don't see that bat as a positive thing. And I think this is a learning experience I had, is I had an organization that used data to tell the stories of their people. Did enough people survive a cardiac arrest? Did we reduce the number of heart attacks because we could create a process and we went from 80 people surviving that event to 90% surviving? So I saw them as positive. But I went into an organization that had been beaten by the numbers and started to use them, and it took me a year to recover from that. So what I learned was to use data well. You really look at the data points as stories and people within your organization. And if you can see that, and you really take the time to see the stories and what's happening behind the numbers, numbers become very effective. The other thing is, if you don't know what you're measuring, be very careful making changes based on those numbers, because you may actually break a system. Because what you're doing is you're measuring the systems and the behaviors. And if you don't understand that, you can yell at a spreadsheet. You can yell at people, and it may not make any meaningful change. So you really need to understand what the numbers are telling you. And what I hear you saying is, in this story and being an A, you knew what to move to get the A. Your parents are just, I just want the A. I'm not asking you what you did to get there. I just want the A.
That's exactly right. I think we're in a day and age where so many organizations have access to so much data that it's difficult to decide which are the important measures and which reports should I be looking at. And I do recognize that's a change. It used to be difficult to get data and information. Now we have almost too much. So what advice would you give someone about creating the right number of measures or the right kinds of measures to get those straight A's that you want on your report card?
Wow, so this is something you taught me. And that is, you have a key performance indicator. But if you're measuring something and it's not one of your core systems, or it doesn't relate back to a core thing with your mission, you may just be asking people to waste time. Don't measure just to measure. Measure what you can make a difference in and measure what you use. If you're not using certain reports, stop and get that time back. And so the thing I would say is be very intentional about measuring what matters and understanding how it's moving your organization. That brings me to something. So what they don't know is we bantered about this and kind of disagreed with this section.
We're not supposed to tell them that part.
Well, but I think that's the authentic piece of being a leader, is that happens in the room, because you actually changed my opinion. You won that discussion if we were going to do winning. And what you made me realize is, in order to take care of the customer and to understand your workforce and measurements, you then also have to understand how you measure everybody that's taking care of the customer, which some people might call supply chain, vendors, those things. That might be a good next topic, is how do you do all of this when there's people outside your organization helping you?
I love it. I mostly love that I won. But for those of you at home, think about this. What should you be doing to get straight A's on your organizational report card? And how do you turn that into a number where your employees feel like they can win the day every day?